Hello and bonjour, you're watching Power Dilemmas here at TAC TV with Sarah Bukhari. It's been a sad day in Toronto. The videos you just watched are of the violence which happened on the streets of Toronto and where a van was used as a vehicle. Suspect Alec Minassian, 25 years old, of Richmond Hill, Ontario, is charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder and 13 counts of attempted murder. Toronto police said they are expecting to lay a 14th charge of attempted murder. A Facebook post moments before the attack, which according to a Facebook spokesperson apparently came from Mr. Minassian's actual account, made reference to an incel rebellion. The term incel or involuntary celibacy has been used by so-called men's rights activists and is often linked to mass shooter Elliot Rodger, whom the Facebook post mentioned by name. It is unclear whether Mr. Minassian wrote the post himself. Officials are not treating the incident as a national security issue, Federal Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale said Monday. This is not the first time a vehicle is used as a weapon. It was used in Münster in Germany, Manhattan, New York in 2017, Barcelona, Spain in August 2017, London Bridge, June 2017, Stockholm, Sweden, April 2017, France in July 2016, and then in Berlin 2016. So to talk about the changing paradigm of security in the West, we have our regular commentator, Mr. Ari Laskin, who is a political analyst with the Capitol Hill Group. He's with us, and we're going to talk about the changing paradigm of security, the changing sense of security nature in the West, and particularly Canada. Welcome to my show, Ari.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. And yes, you've sort of hit on some interesting points there. We are looking at a very different nature of security from the nation state's perspective. Previously, we saw that you had identified players. So we had Al-Qaeda in 2001. That's still continuing on today. You have ISIS that's now formed. You have other organizations that have come out, the IRA from the 1980s and 70s in Northern Ireland. This is something that is a very new phenomenon for us, that we're starting to see a greater rise of these, I would say, fringe groups of society that feel that they've been wronged in some way, shape, or form. So with the incel, the involuntary celibacy movement, and I'm hesitant to call it a movement, but group, is trying to put out the fact that they've been victimized by women who simply won't sleep with them. I find that a little hard to swallow. But I also think that this is something that is going to continue coming up, is more and more people are starting to feel marginalized. More and more people are trying to find some way to belong. And the way that they're doing that, right or wrong, is through the internet. And incels started off on Reddit. Yeah, so Ari,
the question arises, why are vehicles being used as a weapon? How would you connect it?
Yeah, it's easy access. Plain and simple. It's anybody who is over the age of 23 in Canada, or in Ontario rather, is able to go to Ryder or Avis or Budget or any of these rental companies and rent a van or rent a car or rent a truck. I could go to U-Haul, and I actually have gone to U-Haul when I was moving from Washington, D.C. back to Toronto. I rented a U-Haul to move my goods, or to move my life from one place to another. Didn't have to really show much other than my driver's license. And even then, they just sort of glanced at it and saw that, okay, you have a driver's license, that's great. Please sign on the dotted line and we'll take your money. So the access to these vehicles has become very convenient for a lot of people, and it also makes it easier to hit soft targets.
Okay, so while we are comparing violence in the West and violence in the East, you could see that there are different motives of violence in these two regions of the world. So how would you differentiate it as violence in the East is basically behind, wars on connected to terrorism, Islamist wars, and then when you're looking at violence in the West, it's connecting to people like this person who was who just created a big terror on the streets of Toronto.
Well, I would argue that I don't see a difference between violence in the East versus violence in the West.
Okay.
Sure, the subject matter could be different. In the East, maybe it's more based off of religion. In the West, maybe it's based more off of social norms. But at the end of the day, these groups are the same thing. You're looking at a group of people that have been marginalized, that feel that they've been wronged by another group of people that are perceived to be the majority, and they want to act out against them. And they want to show that, we're not going to be standing silently and be walked over, and we're going to show you exactly who we are. And it's, to me, very unfortunate that violence is the outcome, is the byproduct of all of this. It'd be nice, and it's sort of cute to say, it'd be nice if they could use their words rather than their fists. But the unfortunate truth is that these are people that are angry for whatever reason. They feel marginalized for whatever reason. They've grouped together and they've gone forward and tried to right their wrongs. The other thing that I think people should recognize is that these groups and the people that are part of these groups, the group leadership is not necessarily the same mentality as the members of these groups. If you look at an organization like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Jamaat Islami, and then you look at INCEL or the IRA or other organizations that are the Meinheim group, these are organizations that basically use the fact that there's a number of people that feel marginalized, use the fact that they feel like they belong to this group, and then honestly use these people as their weapons and say, you should go out there and run over as many people as you can, because these women out there are just going to treat you the same as other women have. In this case of Alec, I forget his last name, but
Minassian.
the attacker in Toronto. It's an easy way to brainwash somebody. Is if they feel that they're marginalized and then they feel like they're part of a bigger group, if that bigger group tells them this is a way to make everybody feel happy, they're going to go and do it.
Okay, so to talk about the changing paradigm of security in the West and comparing it with the East, we're very lucky to have in our studios today, and I'm very honored to have my professor, actually, Dr. Aisha Siddiqa. Dr. Aisha Siddiqa is associated with a School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and we also have our regular speaker, political analyst with Capitol Hill Group, Ari Laskin. So welcome to my show. So Ari, I will ask you the first question because I gave you a few incidences which happened last year and in 2016 where the perpetrator have used a vehicle in order to create this violence. So first of all, the question is, why are the perpetrators using a vehicle as a weapon, Ari?
Yeah, no, I think that when you're looking at the availability of these vehicles, it's abundantly available. I can go to a budget, I can go to an Avis, I could go to a Ryder, I could go to U-Haul, and I can just give them a license of some sort. It doesn't, like it should be my own, but it's easy to get a fake license or fake ID and say I would like to rent the vehicle, and I'd like to rent it for X number of days or hours, and I'll pay whatever I need to pay. And go forward from there. So for individuals, it's easy to access these vehicles, and it makes it that much easier to go after soft targets with our individuals, like we saw the other day on the streets of Toronto and North York. It's the availability of it, and that's why I believe that you're starting to see a lot more of these incidences happening, and it also it's easier to hide what your true intent is going to be. How many cars do we see traveling up and down Yonge Street on a daily basis? Any of those cars could be a potential weapon. Any of those cars could also not be a potential weapon. So it's easy to hide in plain view, but also the availability of these vehicles just makes it that much easier for them to be used for nefarious reasons.
Okay, so Ari, do you think that there is a new security paradigm emerging in the West?
Yes and no. I think that we're looking at a shift in terms of how people are identifying security threats. Previously, we looked at security threat being one state going against another state. And we see that a little bit right now with the United States and Russia, and the United States and North Korea, and the United States and a number of other jurisdictions. But that's also changing, that you're starting to see these organizations or these cells emerge that are very small, that are comparatively so, that are very disconnected with one another, except for one thing, which is they have one ultimate goal. In this case, you're seeing more and more people feeling that they're disenfranchised or disassociated and marginalized by general society, and so that they're seeking out people that share these views with them. Social media helps identify these groups that much easier, and also helps these individuals reach out to their fellow person who feels the same way that they do. So I don't know really if I would say that you're seeing a changing nature in the security paradigm. I would say there has to be a shift in terms of the tactics that are being employed in order to identify these security threats.
Because the shooting, the mass shooting in Florida was done by a teenager. There were so many teenagers who were murdered. The motives were different.
Yeah, the motives were different, and it's seen as being a different situation, a different issue altogether. If you go onto the web right now and you do a quick search on INCIL, you'll find their website. And on their website, before I came onto the show, I just wanted to see what they had to say on it. Aside from the fact that it's scarily crazy, some of the stuff that's being spent on there, they were praising the Florida shooter as trying to achieve their goal. So was it a different motive? I don't know.
Okay, so at this time, I would really like to understand the motives of violence, of terrorism in the East, and then comparing it to this very incident in Toronto, or maybe the Florida shooting. And I would like to ask this question: how would you differentiate between the two violence-related killings in the East and in the West? And maybe I should ask Dr. Siddiqa that how would you differentiate the violence in these two parts of the world?
See, let me first get back to this conversation. I don't think there is a paradigm shift. What you have, on the one hand, you have a lot more frustration, a lot more, the number of psychological reasons. A society becomes militarized as well. I mean, look at the debate as a result of post 9/11. Most societies have become more militarized. Their thinking is very geared towards terror, counter-terror. So if you have things shooting in Florida, right, you have, and you know, you have the NRA in the United States, and there is this movement. I mean, there's students now who are protesting that there should be gun control. But the American society and the American president are not eager to do anything about it. So there is that on one hand. Now, let's come to what happened in Toronto and similar things happening in Europe, in France, and the UK. I live in the UK and, you know, want to see what has happened there. See, you have to understand that Toronto, it's not been established, and it's probably somebody crazy out there who decided to. And people get motivated watching others. Doesn't mean that they share their ideology, their views. But I think what's important to understand, why do you have these vehicles getting used in these incidents, in these, even in these terror attacks in Europe? I think it also indicates that the security is tightened to a degree that transnational organizations can no longer carry out major attacks. So if they have cells if they have individuals, now it could be individuals attached with transnational organizations that then carry out these attacks, which are the easiest to attack. I mean, as Ari was saying, there's no issue. You can hire a van, any vehicle, and go around mowing down people, who are walking the streets, totally innocent of what's about to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's probably on one hand improvement of the overall security situation, that the limit, I mean, you do not have a 9/11 happening again.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have massive attack in which lots of people get killed. So naturally it's lesser and lesser, but as it changes, and the other thing is that as long as there is no communication, as long as we continue to see it from the lens of terror and counter-terror, I think there is no dialogue happening. How do you stop it? How do you take away these people who might be more susceptible to the message of international or transnational terror organizations?
Mm-hmm.
How do you stop them? How do you deal
Because
with them,
what I'm
motivate
trying to decipher here is violence or terror happening in the East. There are different motivations.
What do you mean by East?
East means Eastern cultures, Pakistan, Middle East. Now we are living in the West. So the motivations are totally different. You want to elaborate on that? Islamist organizations and ISIS and all.
Well, you see, the thing is that not all organizations are Islamist.
Mm-hmm.
In the East, you have a number of countries, like, some of the countries that you mentioned, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, you have presence of transnational terror outfits that are connected, that have a network. I mean, remember that this region, South Asia and the extended Middle East, was involved in a fight, in a war for a very long time, since the 1980s, since the early 1980s. And that has continued. The pendulum has swung from Middle East to South Asia, back to the Middle East, back to South Asia. So networks are very much there, right? Their presence is there. And so the violence still tends to be, it generates higher casualties. I mean, it's simple to have hundreds of people die. So the casualties are much higher. Now compare that to the West. What you have then, because of tightening of security, because of better intelligence, they've limited the operations of these different terror networks. And that's what I'm saying. They try to see that there is no paradigm shift as such, but probably the result of better intelligence, better security, which has limited massive casualties and narrowed down to a few, and individuals then using vehicles to attack people.
Okay, so Ari, Minister Goodell resisted, or he's not using the word terror linked to Manassian's act on the streets of Toronto. How would you make sense of it? And I would like to show it to my viewers, or convey to my viewers that it was not an act of terrorism on the street of Toronto. So if you can elaborate that fact.
I have no idea what he was thinking, not using the word terrorism. Terrorism is defined the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians. This can also include in the pursuit of political aims. So my reading of the situation that happened in the streets of Toronto the other day was somebody used it was an unlawful use of violence against civilians. That to me is terrorism. This individual terrorized Torontonians. He terrorized them, and I don't know, nobody gave him permission to go and run people over with a van. So I think the minister is trying to be cute by half by saying, well, this isn't terrorism. Maybe it's not terrorism with a capital T. that we're not calling this person part of a terrorist organization, or we're not saying that this is part of an organized terrorist organization. But you know what? At the end of the day, this is still terrorism. This is domestic terrorism. It's just as if somebody going around the streets and punching somebody unconscious for no rhyme or reason, but just because, and you never know when it's going to happen. It could happen to you, it could not happen to you. That is terrorism. You are terrorizing a society. You are terrorizing a population. So for the minister to go and say, well, this isn't terrorism, I think is trying to play the political card a little too much. And I think that's a lot of the problems that we're seeing now, or a lot of the escalation of the problems, is trying to play this political correctness card.
Okay.
Call a spade, call it what it is, and stop trying to walk on eggshells around the issue. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. So I don't think that the minister is doing Canadian, Ontarians, or Torontonians any favors by split on the language that they're using.
Okay, so Dr. Siddiqa, I would like to get you in this conversation. Would you think it is, we should term this incident in Toronto as a terrorism? Ari said yes. What do you think? Because the minister has resisted to use the word terrorism, and it's important for our viewers to know.
See, it didn't quack like a duck. That's the problem. I think he's rhyming, Ari's probably rhyming the words terrorize, terrorism. If you can terrorize people through use of violence, but very strictly, definitionally, terrorism is using terror for political goals, to achieve political goals. So when you have specific goals and you use terror, that's when it's called terrorism, it qualifies. So that's what the duck would quack like. But people can use violence. I mean, when you have a break into your house and somebody holds a gun to your head to extort money out of you, that creates terror. That violence creates terror, right? But that's not terrorism. That's, you know, people could have financial reasons for doing that. People could have, you know, psychological imbalance. There could be several reasons. And I think until the inquiry is complete, unless we know what exactly went into the head of the man who mowed down people using the vehicle in Toronto, we can't say if it's terror, act of terror, or it's terrorism. One has to differentiate between the two.
Okay, so Ari, do you have to say anything?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm looking at the NATO definition of terrorism. I'm also looking at an academic's definition of terrorism, and it says, and it's quite clear. It can be. You're right, Professor. It can be used for pursuit of political reasons, but it can also be for the use of religious, ideological, and social objectives.
So,
and that's from Title 22, Chapter 38 of the U.S. Code, and that's something that I would say we need to look at how we've defined it and stick with that definition. Because if we keep on trying to change the target on this and we keep on moving the needle, well, you know what? Then everything can be it can be defined as something that it isn't. In this case, this individual was using a weapon, in this case a vehicle, for the pursuit of ideological and social objectives. Maybe not political, maybe not religious, we don't know yet, but I would say this definitely covers some of the aspects of terrorism for sure.
So I think that's stretching a bit, Ari, I would come in, that's stretching a bit too much. I understand and I completely comprehend the NATO definition. But sociological, again, we can get into a long debate on what is sociological. And do we even know if this person, what were his reasons? I mean, let the police, I would say, complete their inquiry.
Oh, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you, Professor, on that one. We should let the police complete their inquiry, because everything that we're saying right now is just speculation.
Because this person was incel. What is the meaning of incel celibacy? Incel rebellion or involuntary celibacy? Because this something was on his Facebook. What is the meaning of that?
Well, from the definition on their own website, it's people that feel that they've been marginalized by, in this case, women who are organizing against them to not have sex with them, not sleep with them, not have relationships with them. That's what they're saying is the motivation behind this, and by going and targeting these people, or these Chads and Stacys as they call them, then they're going to be able to right the wrongs that they perceive that they've received. I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know. There's been speculation that he wasn't part of Incel and that somebody just put that on his website or on his Facebook page, and then there's also people that are saying, well, he is part of Incel. So I don't know. And as the professor said earlier, and I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with her, we need to let the authorities conduct a full investigation.
Okay, so Ari, do you think are we going to see these incidents more in Canada or in US? I mean, this was the first of its kind in Canada. Going forward, what do you think?
I really hope we don't see this anymore, but I think until we start really addressing the changing nature of domestic terrorism, or the changing nature of violence, and how society is moving, we may see more and more of these instances not being stopped beforehand. I think that you need to change the focus in terms of our intelligence. I think the human intelligence, or HUMINT as it's called, is not as relevant as it once used to be, and we need to look more at social media and signals intelligence. That's really where a lot of these people are rallying, and that's where they're recruiting more and more people. I think gone are the days where you can go and infiltrate a terrorist organization or a cell in a real way and prevent a lot of stuff from happening. It did happen with the Toronto 18, so I will say that's a caveat, or concession rather, but I think all in all, until our intelligence services start shoring up their signals intelligence and their digital intelligence gathering skills, I think that we may end up seeing more of these instances, yes.
Okay, let's bring in the June 7 election, and let's bring in the role of the current Liberal government and the opposition, the Progressive Conservatives. How are they going to use this incident to get a win?
If they're humans, they won't. This is not a political aspect. This is a Ontario, Canadian, Torontonian issue. This is not a conservative, not a liberal, not a New Democrat, not a Green Party, or pick another party. This has nothing to do with the political ideologies. It has everything to do with, we are Canadians, we are a tolerant and accepting culture, and that's part of our pride and joy. I don't think that, and I'm happy to say that I didn't see any of this yesterday during question period, or even today, of anybody trying to politicize this issue. This was a tragedy that happened in our city, and this is a tragedy that I think, if anything, has caused the parties to sort of come together, put aside their political sword wrangling, and say, all right, how do we address this issue, and how do we ensure that Ontarians, Torontonians, and Canadians are safe?
Okay.
Could I just very quickly get back on what Ari was suggesting about more intelligence, more human intelligence? You know, I'm kind of surprised that as a Canadian, anybody is complaining about lack of intelligence, because Canadians have experienced worse kind of terror. I mean, 1985. The Air India bombing, Air India 182 bombing. I mean, from that point, I mean, it was one of the longest inquiries, 20 years.
I think it was just wrapped last year.
Yeah, but the person probably has been freed last year, the person who planted the bomb, or was about to get free. The point is that even in that case, they could not find anyone beyond the man who planted the bomb, although there were other people involved in it. So, yes, intelligence needs to be improved in Canada, for sure. But I think it's more than human intelligence. It's, you know, sometimes you just cannot, I mean, this is not transnational terror groups operating. This is problem within the society. I mean, if it's linked with incel rebellion or involuntary celibacy, right? Issues like that, which are ingrained in a society, which are part of a society, these problems. How can you have that level of intelligence that you can, you know, anybody can go bananas and do something? So I think there has to be a conversation that needs to begin, where you treat people as human and start a conversation. You know, how do you, you know, societies.
But how do you treat people as a human when you have an organization like Incel that doesn't see women as being humans?
No, but the problem is that then you start, I mean, this is one incident, but there could be other incidents in which you can have smaller number of casualties, but it will shake up a society. So the question is, beyond a point, even human doesn't work.
Okay, and I think connections should be seen around mental health issues in Ontario or in Canada, and which may be giving rise to certain issues. Would you agree with that, Ari? Like we have to put more into research into mental health.
I think we have to put more in research and support into mental health, but I think it's an easy cop-out to say, well, this is a matter of mental health and not better funding for our mental health community. There's no question about it. We need more support for mental health. But to go and say that this is a result of somebody who has serious mental health issues, I don't know. I have a tough time buying that.
Because anyone can pick up a gun, kill people, and they say, oh, I have mental health issues, right?
The guy went and rented a van. It takes a certain level of premeditation to go out and rent a van. It's a very weak argument, in my opinion. In my experience, it's a very weak argument to go and say, well, it's this mental health issue. You knew exactly what you were doing on this one. And then he held up a cell phone as a gun and tried to have suicide by cop. That is not the actions of somebody who is struggling with mental health. That is the actions of somebody that wanted not to face the consequences of his action.
Well, it's still a mental issue, mental health issue. I mean, people who go out and kill children in the US all the time, and you know, they have mental health issues as well. It's not that when we say mental health, it means that the person is completely unconscious of what they're doing, but the emotional issues that then lead to this kind of violence, I think that needs to be treated differently and needs attention. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. No, it was a very good debate on this latest incident which happened on the streets of Toronto, and again, a lot of people are you know, shying away, or they're not using the word terror. Particularly our minister Goodale has shied away to use the word terror, and we still have to see how the story develops. And I am trying to get some people from the security to come to my TV show and tell our citizens that everyone is safe. And I hope and pray that such incident does not take place in our very peaceful country, Canada, and a very peaceful and one of the best cities called Toronto. With this thought, I will sign off. Thank you for watching Power Dilemmas, and I'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, who is here from United Kingdom, and political analyst Ari Laskin from Capitol Hill Group. You have yourself a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.